in Connecticut and I want to go to Colorado. But to do that, I first have to drive a car to the train station, hop a train to a bus station, take a bus to the airport, and then finally board a flight. Which is super frustrating because there is also a perfectly good airport right here. But the thing is, for most of the time I've lived here, flying out of this airport was not really an option. There was a single flight to Philadelphia and that's it. And this is true not just here, but at hundreds of mid-sized airports across the country that have steadily lost air service. This has huge ramifications for people in smaller cities and towns, not just for vacation reasons, but economically too. The Regional Airline Association estimates that air service brings some $152 billion in economic activity every year to smaller cities and towns. This dwindling service is just one symptom of our whole aviation mess that dates back to a 1978 law, one that was supposed to prevent this and many other things we hate about modern flying. After reading a couple books, perusing congressional reports from the 1970s, spending way too much time on the website of the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and finally hopping on a flight myself, I discovered something that makes me equal parts giddy and furious. There's a quiet revolution playing out at mid-sized airports across the country, and you can see it right here.
And here.
Look at these. These graphs are my hyperfixation of the month.
Like the one I just showed you from New Haven, each of these graphs shows the number of passengers passing through these small to mid-sized airports each year from 2002 to 2024.
I spent way too long on the BTS website making these, so let's really take it all in. These long, slow declines, or in Cheyenne's case, chaotic ups and downs, would have been illegal pre-1978. So let's go back there. See, back then, airlines were heavily regulated. Since 1938, a central authority called the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB for short, had regulated airlines less as a private industry and more as a public good. Think the USPS. The USPS can't just stop delivering mail to your tiny hometown because it's not profitable, and neither could airlines back in the day. At least not without asking the CAB for permission. My millennial 2024 brain nearly short-circuited from this information. It's just so bizarrely different from how it works today. So I asked myself, how did that change happen? Throughout the 60s and 70s, prominent free market economists and politicians began questioning the efficacy of the CAB. Most notably, Senator Ted Kennedy and economist/deregulator-in-chief Alfred E. Kahn. And what were they fussed about? Mainly high prices. So deregulation advocates argued that whatever benefits the CAB provided, they were no longer worth the high ticket prices. So in 1978, now with Alfred E. Kahn as CAB chairman, President Jimmy Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act. Advocates for the act, which was passed nearly unanimously, pictured a future in which some 200 airlines operated across the country, bringing efficiency and lower prices to anyone who wanted to fly. But a few were worried about what deregulation might cause, including, perhaps surprisingly, the airlines themselves. Except for United, most airlines were worried that deregulation would bring chaos, destructive competition, and worse service. Delta circulated an article warning of deregulation as a wolf in sheep's clothing. And one of the VPs at American, Bob Crandall, actually yelled in the halls of Congress at a 28-year-old staffer who helped write the act, "You f***ing academic pinhead, you don't know shit. You can't deregulate this industry. You're going to wreck it." Don't hold it in, Bob. We should all take a lesson from Bob. Let your feelings out. Listen, people have written entire books, theses, etc. on this topic. I, for one, lobbied my editors for a 2-hour documentary on the effects of airline deregulation, but they said no. So pretty please see the description box below for all of my sources. Anyway, in that report I mentioned earlier, Senator Kennedy listed out 7 arguments against deregulation and basically hand-waved away all of them, saying like, relax, airlines and anyone else who's opposed to deregulation, it's gonna be fine, a little free market capitalism in this industry is just what the doctor ordered. These are pretty funny in hindsight because more or less they all happened, something even former airline deregulators were publicly recognizing as early as 1992. We don't have time to review all 7, but I wanted to focus in on the 2 that are most obvious if you just look around at the airline industry today. If you've made it this far into this extended brain blast of mine with me, I just want to say thank you, and we are getting to the main point very, very soon. But first, let's talk about Senator Kennedy's 3rd listed counterargument. For a brief moment in the 1980s, deregulation seemed to work. Imagine just an explosion of energy and activity that the author of this book called a capitalistic free-for-all. One source I found said that 24 new airlines entered the market between the passage of the Act in 1978 and 1985, offering no-frills flights for bargain prices. But by 1988, consolidations, acquisitions, and bankruptcies had whittled those 24 down to just 2. too. It turns out that the cab wasn't the only thing preventing just anyone from starting up a successful airline. It's a business that's hard to do right and easy to do wrong, especially if your airport neighbor undercuts your fare prices by a few bucks. So that dream of some 200 carriers operating simultaneously quickly died. Even major legacy carriers couldn't navigate the suddenly free market. Braniff, Eastern Airlines, and Pan Am all filed for bankruptcy by the early 1990s. Pan Am! The Pan Am. Mergers and acquisitions continued from the 1990s through today. Some mega mergers between 2008 and 2013 created the big four that we have today. Between them, Delta, United, American, and Southwest control some nearly 70% of the domestic market share, and nearly 80% if you include American passengers flying internationally. And how they do so leads me to my next point. These airlines operate on a hub and spoke model. For an explanation, see our recent video on the Southwest fiasco by my illustrious colleague Tori.
If you want to go from point 1 to point 2, under the hub and spoke model, a flight would need to go from point 1 to this coffee cup, aka the airline's hub, aka its main connecting airport. Then it goes from the coffee cup to point number 2.
So each airline dominates its own fiefdoms, hubs. Like 73% of all passengers flying into and out of Atlanta, the busiest airport in the entire world, fly on Delta. 73%. So monopolization of both the overall market and specific individual airports, check. Oh, and that extreme consolidation has driven up ticket prices anyway. More Perfect Union recently did a video on this, which I will clip here.
The big guys stopped competing with each other head to head on price around the turn of the century, around 2001, 2002.
Today, if your options on a given route are only Delta, United, and American, you're guaranteed to pay more.
So we'll add a little sub check mark for that one. Finally, it's the big one. The reason we're all here, reduced service to smaller communities. Here's the thing about the hub and spoke model. A lot of the flights that feed the enormous hubs aren't actually Delta, United, or American. They're actually smaller regional airlines that just appear to be Delta, United, or American until you look closely. That's how most regional airlines in the US operate, not so much based on regions as the name suggests, but at the behest of bigger airlines. And that makes them vulnerable. See, in times of economic strife, say in the wake of a global pandemic that brings air travel to a halt for months on end, just to name a random example, the easiest way for airlines to cut costs is to cut those routes. And cut they did. The cuts kept coming and they did not stop coming, especially after the pandemic. Some of this just makes no sense to me. Take New Haven, for example. Despite having nearly 900,000 people in the county, Tweed has never been a major airport, and it dwindled down to nearly nothing in 2021. In fact, and this is the craziest thing I found on the BTS website, for a while in the mid-2010s, the same number of people were going through Tweed New Haven Airport as through the airport in Dubuque, Iowa. No offense meant to Dubuque, but that is absurd given our relative populations. Anyway, this whole situation forces people to drive or commute for hours before they're able to actually board a flight. So, reduced service to small communities, check. But where I saw nothing but frustration and long pre-flight commute times in this topsy-turvied airport market, two businessmen saw opportunity. And if you're looking for your next business opportunity, check out The Hustle's Side Hustle Ideas Database. It's a curated list of 100 unique ideas for anyone looking to supplement their income, pursue a passion, or just check out new ideas. There's something in there for everyone, except for maybe those of you who are interested in launching your own airline. As we've discovered so far, that's more of a main hustle, not so much a side hustle. But for everything else, check out the link below for that Side Hustle Ideas Database, and let's get back to the video. Behind me is something I never thought I would see, a busy, bustling Tweed New Haven airport. See, if we look at our graph here, we can see that the number of passengers passing through Tweed every year has increased some 67-fold in the last 3 years alone. Which is crazy because in mid-2021, Tweed was about to lose service altogether until a hero came along. I can't do that. In the form of something that we as Americans haven't seen in a long time, a new airline. Meet Avelo. Avelo is the brainchild of Andrew Levy, a former chief-level exec at both Allegiant and United. In 2018, he acquired a small airline called Extra that had done mostly charter flights since the late 1980s. Levy's intent was to transform it into an ultra-low-cost carrier that connected the spokes that the big airlines had left behind. He raised $125 million to launch this new project in February 2020. So he had to pause, obviously, and try again later. In April 2021, he launched Avelo with 11 unserved routes out of Burbank, California. Levy has consistently added more routes since then, and it's only been 3 years, but that's longer than a lot of startups last. As he once explained to Time magazine, I tell people all the time, hey, people in Binghamton like to go to the same places as the people who live in New York and LA. There are just fewer of those people. Now, if it seems odd to you that an airline with its first base in Burbank, California would next turn to New Haven, Connecticut, then you are not Andrew Levy. New Haven has become Avelo's busiest base, one that's mainly focused on shipping chilly New Englanders to sunnier climates, but busiest nonetheless. It's heavily invested in expanding the airport and lengthening its runways such that larger planes can land, but that's a whole local controversy itself that we don't have time to cover here. Now, I think it's worth noting that my initial reaction upon hearing of Avelo was skepticism. I'm so used to just a couple name brand airlines that a new one seemed suspicious. I figured I would be fighting for my life with hidden fees or non-existent legroom. So I decided to go check it out.
I've lived here 7 of the last 13 years. I've never flown out of Tweed, New Haven. Now's the time.
Just wanted to see in front of you.
Made it to Myrtle Beach. The flight was fine. It was mostly full, maybe a dozen seats not taken. There was no in-flight food or snacks, which is to be expected with a low-cost carrier. It seemed like I had a little bit more legroom than in the last flight I remember taking, which was with Delta. I mean, overall, if the option is between no flight out of Tweed, New Haven and a flight out of Tweed, New Haven, I would give this a 10 out of 10.
Okay, made it to my hotel room in Myrtle Beach. So my experience on Avelo was fine. But even if it was terrible, it's literally been the only option at Tweed, New Haven for the last 3 years. Until now. Tweed is about to get even busier as another recent startup airline, Breeze, launches service in November. Now, when you're watching this. Breeze is the 5th airline launched by David Neeleman, who launched it just 6 weeks after Avelo in 2021. And yes, if you're also down the Tradwife Ballerina Farm rabbit hole, he's that David Neeleman, Ballerina Farm's father-in-law. That's just a little shout out for the, 10% of our audience who cares about that kind of thing. Well, while I'm here, I thought I would go to the beach. So I don't think this is a very walkable place, so I'm going to summon an Uber.
Well, I said Avelo was here to bring chilly New Englanders down to sunnier climates, but the one day I chose to come down to Myrtle Beach, it's overcast and raining. So we're gonna make this fast. Breeze and Avelo both frequently add new routes, and they overlap at a bunch of different airports throughout the country. But Breeze's arrival at New Haven will mark the first time that one is moving into territory completely dominated by the other. Yes, it's finally happening, competition in the free market. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, just remember how deeply uncompetitive this industry typically is. We're gonna move farther down the beach because if I'm gonna be suffering in the rain, I might as well also be on the beach. Look, even in the rain, I'll take it. This is nice. Normally without Tweed New Haven's new deal with Avelo, this would have taken me more than all day to get here. I was in New Haven at noon, and now I'm standing on a beach in South Carolina at 4:45. That's not bad. A similar revolution is playing out at mid-sized airports across the country. New Haven is the most dramatic example that I found, but both Breeze and Avelo are making substantial inroads at airports that were underserved or not served at all. Of course, they won't be a panacea for every small airport that's lost service. There are other things getting in the way of that, like high fuel prices and ongoing pilot shortages. Take my old rival, Dubuque. Avelo arrived in 2023 and left after just a year, even after the county offered $1 million in taxpayer funds to keep Avelo around. That's a phenomenon called a minimum revenue guarantee and is perhaps fodder for a future video. It's only been 3 years, so time will tell if Breeze and Avelo have the staying power of, say, a JetBlue. And in conclusion, I still can't fly directly from New Haven to Denver. So to Andrew Levy and David Neeleman, consider this video my personal plea for that route. Thank you. Oh, and be sure to check out the Hustle's Side Hustle Business Ideas database linked below, and also check out the video I referenced earlier by my colleague, Tori. It's about Southwest and it's awesome. Bye.